Hello everybody and welcome to Every Movie Ever. I, of course, am Eric and I am here to review, as always, every movie ever made. This week on the show we're going to be looking at movies, we're looking at Bronson and Bruno movies. So movies that star either Charles Bronson or Bruno himself, Bruce Willis. This is inspired, of course, by the upcoming Death Wish remake, wherein Bruce Willis will be reprising Charles Bronson's role as Mr. Death Wish. So I'm in honor of these two great gentlemen. I am here today outside of Nakatomi Towers, the setting, of course, of the great Die Hard. And I have somebody new helping me out behind the scenes today. I've got Ryan helping me out. I'm super excited to have him. But let's get going by talking about some Bronson classics, and I'm going to start today with Breakout. So Breakout, this is the movie where Bronson is a pilot. He's got one of them small planes, and somebody tries to hire him to fly to Mexico and break a bunch of dudes out of a Mexican prison. This one is about as all-star as your average Charles Bronson movie, late period Bronson movie gets. You got Robert Duvall in it, you've got Randy Quaid, and you've got Bronson's wife, Jill Ireland, in it. I'll talk more about Jill a little bit later. This is a pretty good Bronson movie. There's some good action in it. The setup is a little novel. Usually you get Bronson running around, cities, big cities and stuff. So it's kind of interesting to have him hanging around, Mexico and Texas and stuff like that. It's about as good as these, later period Bronson movies get, which is why I'm going to give it 2.5 stars. All right, up next, Murphy's Law. This is a movie from around a little bit later. This is a little later in Bronson's career. This is a pretty stereotypical Charles Bronson movie. We're back in the big city, and Bronson is a cop on the run. He's a good cop who runs across some dirty business, and crooked cops are after him and crooks are after him. Really, the only thing that's notable about this one is that it co-stars Luke's sister from Gilmore Girls, who adds a little bit of charm to the movie, playing, a younger, sassy female to, with a real potty mouth, to be opposite of Bronson. So Bronson usually in these movies is a solitary figure. It's a little bit fun for him to have that sort of a stock character to play off of, and Luke's sister does a good job with it. But again, I think you're going to see as we go through some of these later era Bronson movies that they're all about the same thing. They're all variations on a formula, and they're all kind of fun watches, but they're all just about the same level of thing, which is 2.5 stars. With Assassination, we're getting very near the end of Bronson's career here. And again, it's the same kind of thing. It's again, we have a different setup. This time, Bronson, Chuck, he's an FBI or Secret Service agent who's tasked with protecting the First Lady, and the First Lady doesn't want the protection. It's pretty fun. It's it's about the same consistent level of good, not great that these late era Bronsons really strive for. The standout thing in this one is co-star again Jill Ireland, Chuck's wife. Jill Ireland is in a number of these Charles Bronson movies, which isn't terribly surprising, but she's always a really welcome presence. Outside of being, a really foxy lady, she's a fun, and talented actress, and honestly, her and Bronson's chemistry is really solid. It's undeniable. You can see that, why they're married and that they're married, and that her presence always adds something to these movies. There is usually, I suppose it goes without saying that there's a female lead in these movies, but there's usually some sort of, half-half romantic interest type character. And for me, it only really works when it's Jill. She does a phenomenal job, always a welcome presence, but still, that only still, manages to bring this one up to that level of 2.5 stars. Messenger of Death, this is another Bronson shoot 'em up. I don't know that I've necessarily mentioned this in talking about these movies. I've talked about that there is a sort of Bronson formula. Here's the Bronson formula. Chuck stumbles upon some sort of conspiracy or, or gang or something, and then he shoots a bunch of guys for an hour and a half. That's a Charles Bronson movie. In Messenger of Death, there's a little bit of a twist on it in that instead of being a cop or a private eye or a vigilante, Charles Bronson is a journalist, because when you look at this guy, you think newspaper man. Anyway, In this one, he's up against a separatist Mormon sect that he's figured out has some sort of weird conspiracy going on. Again, same Charles Bronson story, entertaining but not anything special. 2.5 stars. All right, I think we've been screwing around for long enough. So let's get to the meat and potatoes of the Bronson catalog. Let's talk about Death Wish. This is, of course, the series that I guess I can't say makes Bronson famous, but it's, his signature series. This is the series of movies wherein Charles Bronson plays Paul Kersey, who's just some regular guy whose wife, in the first one, whose wife gets murdered, whose daughter gets really roughed up by a group of thugs that include a young Jeff Goldblum, of all people. And Charles Bronson decides he needs to have revenge, buys a bunch of guns, and goes out killing every gang member he runs across. Death Wish, the first one, is the peak of these movies in a lot of ways. It's a real movie. It's a real movie with real ideas. This one, later period Bronson stuff, and as we're going to see in the rest of the Death Wish series, gets really exploitive. Here, though, this is a movie that's trying to say something, right? Because Bronson never is able to track down the gang members who killed his wife. He's just waging a war on gangs in general. And it's a movie that, while somewhat to pretty exploitive, because it's still a movie that's about shooting up a bunch of dudes, is a movie that's trying to say something about vigilante justice, and that maybe it's not the best idea, and that maybe vigilante justice and revenge are not the most fulfilling things in the world. It's a pretty good movie. I'm going to give this one a whole 3 stars. So Death Wish is a big success. Years later, the Cannon Company decides to pick up the Death Wish series and make a Death Wish 2. Cannon, if you're not familiar, get familiar. If you're a guy like me, the Cannon catalog is made for you. This is Golan and Globus. They're a pair of producers from Israel who came to America and started making a bunch of bonkers movies. And Death Wish 2 is definitely one of them. It's years later. Paul Kersey Charles Bronson has moved from New York to L.A. His daughter, who had been savagely attacked in part 1, she has just gotten out of the mental hospital she's been in, and what happens? Of course, this day she gets out, she gets savagely attacked and murdered, and so Bronson goes gun crazy all over again. They've got Bronson back. They brought back Michael Winner, who directed part 1 to do part 2, and they've added my favorite Bronson co-stars we've already discussed, Jill Ireland. So this, to me, is Charles Bronson Yahtzee. I think Death Wish Part 1 is probably the better movie. I personally enjoy Death Wish 2 more because it combines a lot of what was going on in 1 with some real just bonkers stuff. There's a great, now when I say great, I think we need to make a stipulation here. These movies are super violent. And if you are not into violence, then this is not going to be your thing. Also, the Death Wish series and really every Charles Bronson movie are very much a product of their time, and they tend to rely on there being a violent attack against a woman to get Charles Bronson going. That is not okay, and I do not care for that. And that's part of what keeps these movies down in the ratings, for sure. But once things get going, you fast forward through those parts, you're all right. Death Wish 2 contains maybe my favorite Charles Bronson line of all time, wherein he comes across a gang member. By the way, big difference between Death Wish 2 and Death Wish 1. This is where Charles Bronson starts being able to actually track down specific gang members and kill them, which is ridiculous, and that's part of what I enjoy about it. But anyway, he tracks a guy down to a parking garage that a guy he wants to kill, and he comes up to this gang guy and he goes, "Hey, do you believe in Jesus?" And the guy goes, "Yeah." And Charles Bronson goes, "Well, you're gonna meet him." That's Death Wish 2, 3.5 stars. So that brings us to Death Wish 3. Death Wish 3 is the point at which the series becomes just hot garbage. This is a real trash movie, and everything that was dumb about the previous Death Wishes gets turned up. This is also where the Charles Bronson that we talked about earlier in the movie, the Charles Bronson of Assassination and Breakout, this is kind of where he's born. This is the late period Bronson movie, where now it's just insane. It's a lot of fun, though. Charles Bronson moves back to New York, back to a bad New York neighborhood that is under siege from a gang, and the cops won't help. So after Charles Bronson's buddy gets murdered by these gang members, so finally, by the way, for the first time, an attack on a male is the inciting incident, which is a welcome change of pace. Charles Bronson teams up with all the people in the neighborhood to get revenge on the gang, and Charles Bronson goes full Home Alone, rigging up all of the various apartments with all sorts of little murder traps, most of which involve boards with nails in them, and then runs around shooting up gang members for 90 minutes. This one has a couple of familiar faces in it. Alex Winter, who was Bill, I think, in the Bill and Ted movies, is one of the gang members, and Marina Sirtis, who played Counselor Troy in The Next Generation, is somebody who's living in the neighborhood. So again, hot garbage, but pretty fun, 2.5 stars. Death Wish 4, sometimes called Death Wish The Crackdown, is the point at which I'm kind of checking out on the Death Wish movies. This one's really forgettable. It has some sort of a drug plot for the first time. So instead of just killing gangs, now Bronson's upset that these guys are, peddling drugs on his turf or whatever. Danny Trejo shows up in this one, which is sort of memorable. The only other memorable thing about this one is that it has a memorable bumper car death, wherein Charles Bronson's girlfriend's daughter's boyfriend gets killed by being thrown on top of a bumper car thing. So that cage up top, when you're in the bumper cars and you got that pole with the little electric thing that scrapes across that wire mesh at the top and gets the power from it, they throw a guy onto that to electrocute him. That is, a fairly memorable death. The rest of this movie is boring and forgettable. 2 stars. Death Wish 5, sometimes called Death Wish 5, The Face of Death, is far and away the worst Death Wish movie. It's a real yawner. This one is specifically about the mob. Chuck decides he needs to take on the mob for some reason. It's one of the last movies he ever made. These movies have never felt more direct-to-video than this one. It's not a lot of fun. The only real saving grace, outside of Bronson, who continues to be an appealing, somewhat presence, is this one's got another good Bronson line in it. Now listen, it's entirely possible that this line is actually in Death Wish 4 and that I am confused, but I think it's in Death Wish 5. And in this movie, and what happens is this, is Bronson is hiding out in a mob guy's apartment waiting to get the jump on him. And the mob guy comes in and finds Bronson looking in the fridge for some reason. And the mob guy goes, "What are you doing?" And Bronson goes, "I'm making a sandwich." And that's pretty good. But otherwise, this movie is really lame, 1.5 stars. So I think I have said all that I have to say about good old Chuck Bronson. Let's move into Bruno himself. Let's talk Bruce Willis, and let's kick it off with the Bruce Willis movie. Let's talk Die Hard. This is the action movie of the 80s, and probably the action movie that set the level for every action movie that has followed it. It is a great one, directed by the great action director John McTiernan. If you haven't seen this movie, I don't know what is wrong with you. You are either a small child whose parents will not allow them to see R-rated movies, or something else. But please rush out and see Die Hard. This is a great one. This is the one where Bruce, he has been estranged from his wife. So he's a New York cop. He flies to LA where she has a job in the new Nakatomi Tower office building. They're having a Christmas party. That's right, folks, this is a Christmas movie. He goes to the party. Is the party attacked by terrorists? Yeah, it is. Do they have a super complicated plan involving stealing stocks or something that I can't quite explain to you right now? Yeah, they do. The terrorists are led by the great Alan Rickman. Alan and his stooges, they've rounded up all the people working in the office building except Bruce Willis. They don't know he's there. So he goes on a one-man killing spree to take out the terrorists. He's got a little help on the outside from Reginald VelJohnson, so the dad from Family Matters, as a cop. He's also a cop in Family Matters. Is he the same guy? Could be, I don't know. Anyway, this is great. You got a ton of great stuff in this one where you got Bruno walking through broken glass. You've got him coming face to face with Rickman, not knowing it's Rickman. You got a lot of great action set pieces. You've got ho, 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 I've got a shotgun now. You've got crawling through vents. Here's the thing. Great helicopter explosion. What sets Die Hard apart in the action movie genre, what really makes it the king, is its approach to Bruno's character, John McClane. There's a lot of lip service paid in action movies to the heroes being an everyman. And in Die Hard, he really is. You really feel like he's a sarcastic New York cop who is in over his head. And a big part of that is when things happen to Bruno that should hurt him, they do. He gets hurt in the movie. So there's a very famous part where he has to walk without shoes across some broken glass. His feet all get cut up. His face gets, punched and bruised and cut up. By the end of this movie, he is covered with blood. He is not a Superman. Every time he gets hurt, it actually hurts him and it stays with him. It's not like one of those things in an action movie where a dude gets shot and then in the next scene he's fine. It's not like, oh my gosh, and then I'm walking it off. Bruno is hurt for this whole, you really feel, the tension of it. It's a great, great movie. I can't say enough good things about it. 5 stars. Let's talk Die Hard 2. Die Hard 2, little bit of trivia for you. On the video release, it's called Die Hard 2 Die Harder, but I don't believe it's called that anywhere else. It's certainly not in the movie. It's a great title, though, so I like calling it Die Hard 2 Die Harder. Directed by another action movie great, Rennie Harlin. Now, Die Hard 2 is almost by definition not as good as Die Hard. Part of, like I said, part of what's so great about Die Hard is that everyman quality to it. With Die Hard 2, where it essentially all happens to him again, you lose a bit of that everyman, right? Because now, this time, John is at an airport waiting for his wife to arrive when terrorists take over the airport, and he's the one man that can stop them. Listen, it's a fun movie, and they keep a lot of the spirit of the original, but once it's happened to this guy a second time, it's a little bit harder to wrap your head around. And without Alan Rickman to really anchor the villain side of things, which is about a group of ex-military dudes, is good but not as good. And it's nice that the movie plays lip service to the ideas of a sequel where you got McClane crawling through vents again. He's like, I can't believe this is happening to me again. And that's kind of funny, and it's a funny, kind of fun movie. It's just not as good as Die Hard. Still, it's a superior sequel in this mold, and so I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. Part 3 is Die Hard with a Vengeance. Now listen, folks. This is the one where they've decided to take a step away from what the Die Hard formula is, which is that John McClane finds himself in a confined space like a building or an airport or whatever, and he's got to get rid of the guys that are inside it. This one takes place in the whole city, which I think is New York. I don't know. Anyway, he's running around the whole city. This time he is teamed up. Because I guess they felt like John McClane was growing beyond being an everyman, they team him up with a new everyman played by Samuel L. Jackson. A lot of people like Die Hard with a Vengeance. They'll say it's a fine closeout to the Die Hard trilogy. I'm sorry, I'm not one of those people. This one just doesn't do it for me. The first one is king. The second one's a ton of fun. This one to me is very so-so. You come to it because you want to watch Bruno run around and shoot some people, but there's not a whole lot else to keep you there, I'm sorry to say. It's still, it's fine. It's fine, but it's just kind of not for me. 2.5 stars. So after a pretty long slumber, they said, hey, let's bring John McClane back again in Live Free or Die Hard. And then they said, and I'll never understand this, if you can explain it to me, then you are a smarter man than I kind of know why. Anyway, they said, Die Hard, everybody loves Die Hard. Everybody loves it. Let's make another one, but this time, how the other Die Hard movies are all rated R and super violent and stuff? let's make this one PG-13, such that Bruce can't even say his catchphrase. I, of course, cannot say it here. I'm not going to say it on television, but you know, he says, yippee-ki-yay. Well, he can't say that in this movie, and that's stupid. This is another run around the whole city one. John McClane the idea of him as an everyman is gone. There's a part where he shoots a motorcycle at a plane in this one. And then there's another part where a jet fighter is crashing and John McClane is riding on the wing like it's a surfboard. What is going on? They also team him up with Justin Long in this movie. Why is Justin Long here? And if you're saying, why is Justin Long here, then you gotta say, why is Kevin Smith in this movie? Kevin Smith is a subpar director. He is certainly not an actor. This is not a good one, folks. 2 stars. Not content to leave well enough alone, the Hollywood suits brought John McClane back again in Good Day to Die Hard. This time, John McClane's in Russia. This is a rough one, folks. I don't even know what to say to you about this one. They have taken Die Hard, the king of the mountain, and then they have made the most generic movie you can imagine. And that's really all I have to say about this stinkburger. 1 star. Well, now that we got the Die Hards out of the way, which was a real... Let's look at some other Bruno classics. Let's talk 12 Monkeys. And friends, I love me some 12 Monkeys. This is the movie where it's the future. The Earth has been, you know, like destroyed and whatnot by a virus. Some dudes find Bruce Willis, who is not action movie Bruce Willis. This does not know what's going on at any point Bruce Willis. I don't believe he even shoots a gun in this one. He might not even punch somebody. Bruce Willis is essentially a guy in the future, a schmuck, who gets sent back in time to try and figure out what caused this virus by a bunch of future weirdos. And at no point does Bruce really know what's going on. He's just kind of stumbling through, trying to figure things out in this sort of pseudo-film noir time travel movie that co-stars Brad Pitt as a crazy guy. It's a great movie. It's from the great Terry Gilliam. He, of course, started his career as a member of Monty Python's Flying Circus. He did all the animations, all the little cartoons in between. Now he's a director. He makes really cool and stylish movies. 12 Monkeys is one of the best of them. His envisioning of the future is really surreal and exciting. And everything then that happens in the past, wherein, essentially, you know, once he gets sent to the past, no one believes him. And Bruce spends a lot of time in and out of insane asylums wherein people don't believe him that he's from the future, and he honestly doesn't know if what he's talking about is real either. It's a great movie. It's based a little bit off of a short French film, but it's great. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil a lot for you. It's got a really terrific twist ending to it. I like it a lot. 4.5 stars. So a second ago I told you that my dad likes The Fifth Element. So let's go +1 on that. Let's talk about The Sixth Sense. Now this is a movie my dad loves. Now here's the thing, folks. This movie came out like 20 years ago, and it was a big deal. It has a twist ending. If you have somehow made it this far in your life and not know what the twist ending is, then turn off your TV because I'm going to spoil it. So this is the movie where Haley Joel Osment, he's a little kid, about yay high, who can see dead people, and Bruce Willis is the guy who's trying to help him figure out, I don't know, why, I guess. I don't really remember. I couldn't really tell you exactly what the movie's about at a certain point. But the whole big thing, it leads to this conclusion where Bruce Willis is dead. He's been a ghost the whole time. Wah! My dad will not shut up about that. He will still, to this day, tell you the story of being in the movie theater and everybody gasped at the same moment. When that happened, you couldn't believe it. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Listen, it felt like a good movie at the time. Looking at it again today, it's kind of so-so. M. Night Shyamalan, the guy who directed it, we all thought he was going to be the next Hitchcock for some reason, has proven to be a massive disappointment. And this first movie kind of doesn't hold up. Like, it's a movie that, because it was a well-executed twist, and when it hit, you were like, oh man, this is a great movie. and then you watched it again and you went, oh, wait a second, it's all right. Like, this movie's fine, I guess. Which means that I'm going to tell you, it's a 3-star movie. So that's it for this episode of Every Movie Ever. Thank you so much for watching. I want to thank Ryan for joining us for his first episode of Every Movie Ever. He's done a great job behind the scenes. We got to give a shout out to the other guys who helped me out, to Ben and Gavin. You guys always do great work. We'll see you here next time as we keep trying to review Every Movie Ever.